Hello, everybody. You're watching meteorologist Hutch Johnson on Hutch's Weather. Today, we're going to talk about our risk of severe weather. And first, we're going to point out the areas of concern across the nation and what hazards we have to look at. We're also going to take a look at the latest forecasts and highlight what risks we may see, where, and why. And we'll talk about the progression of the storms and what you may expect. We'll also go ahead and go into some details about the different storm threats and where we may have more spin in the atmosphere and more of a risk for large hail in the atmosphere as well. And we're also going to go around with the hour-by-hour forecast and show you the timing of these storms in your neck of the woods. 3 distinct zones. We'll get started right away, but first, again, my name's meteorologist Hutch Johnson. I have 26 years of on-air experience talking about the weather as a meteorologist. Also, upwards of 20 years in the classroom teaching meteorology. I love talking about the weather, and I sure enjoy the interactive ability that we have here on this platform to talk about the weather. So drop a comment down below. Let me know where you're watching from. If you have a question, I'll do my best to get an answer for you there. But let's get started. And first, I love the likes on these videos. And if you can, hit the subscribe button and don't forget to hit the bell to get notified when I have more content for you. Now let's take a look at those risks. We'll start with the Storm Prediction Center risks. The high country of Colorado, Wyoming, and Nebraska seeing a chance for severe weather where you see the yellows. Yellows in the deep south and the Mississippi Delta and East Texas. And also we have that slight risk of severe storms all the way from Kentucky right through the nation's capital, New York, Pennsylvania, including both Pittsburgh and, well, out towards Philly and Boston as well. Those are all a slight risk, a level 2 on a 5-level scale. The green areas are areas where we may see storms flirt with severe criteria. Here's what the different categories mean. Today we have green and yellow on the map that you saw. A marginal risk that means in those green areas that storms may flirt with severe criteria. Severe criteria is 1-inch diameter hail, or it's gusts of wind, straight line winds that are 58 miles per hour or greater. So storms might flirt with that. That's on this low level of the risk scale. Now, when we get up to the slight risk in those yellow areas we showed you in the 3 distinct areas on the map, that increases a little higher. So storms may flirt with 1-inch hail and 58 mile per hour winds. Here we'll have numerous storms in the yellow areas typically, and the risk is a little higher, 1 to 2-inch diameter hail. Gusts upwards of maybe 70 miles per hour. And we can't rule out isolated tornadoes, not necessarily long-lived, strong, long path type tornadoes like you see in the higher risk categories. By the way, the Storm Prediction Center typically on any given year might issue 0 or maybe 1 high risk day. Not something that typically comes out, just so you get a little bit of a feeling for that. Now, as we take a look at the different areas here, we're going to look at the forecast. Let's get right to it with a national view of an hourly updated high resolution convective allowing model called the HRRR model. Now, as we take a look at this model, what you're going to notice with regards to our timing of it here as we head into the evening hours, a group of showers and thunderstorms moving out of the southern Great Lakes region and some that have moved out of Arkansas now as we've headed through the afternoon. Here they go, making their way toward the East Coast. And again, I will highlight each individual area of concern. So the afternoon and early evening threat is going to work its way into parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, and a line of storms develops out as we head into areas like Pennsylvania. Those storms will shift off to the east, and then we get the storms forming in the high plains as we go through the evening hours and late. These will have a chance at lasting a little bit longer, and storms down to the south will be working their way from north to south onto the Gulf Coast states as we head into the evening hours. And then the risk is pretty much offshore. Most of us will see this ending as we go through the overnight, but we'll highlight those different areas right now. In fact, let's do that. Let's zoom in to the populated East Coast, and let's do that on this same computer forecast model and take a look at its answer for what is being expected as we look into the Virginias and the nation's capital and the Ohio River Valley. Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, and there's the Maryland, Delaware, New York City area. And well, maybe we'll look up a little bit higher. The threat for this area is going to go through. Now, the timing you're seeing up here is Greenwich Mean Time. So you have to subtract 5 hours for the central time zone. 4 hours is what you subtract here on the East Coast. So storms developing in the high country of West Virginia, moving through the Virginias, will continue as we go into the deep overnight hours. Here you're looking at about 10 o'clock at night, okay? So at 10 o'clock at night, we still have strong to severe thunderstorms rolling out of places like Kentucky, and into West Virginia. Through West Virginia and working their way through portions of New Jersey as we go into the midnight time frame. And then as we go into the deep overnight, most of the storm threat moves offshore. Now, I do want to point out that if you happen to live up in the New York City area, let's get a look up there in New York so you can get a better view and a timing of these storms. Make its way through upstate New York and out west near Buffalo, mainly skirting the Pennsylvania line. Pittsburgh, you'll have that chance as we go into the evening hours now. And then as we head into the overnight hours, these storms will blossom and extend into places like Philadelphia, Jersey, New York City, Long Island, and off into the, Massachusetts and Boston. And again, by the time we get to midnight or 1 a.m., they start exiting and head off into the Atlantic. That's that area of the country, that risk area. Now we're going to head to the map and go to the deep south and, Texas and Louisiana. And this will give you a view that this model is showing that we'll have those storms working their way into the Mississippi Delta. I'll scoot back just a little bit. And then they kind of form back here and they backdoor their way in from the east into parts of Texas. That's what this model says. Some of these models, and I can tell you this as a meteorologist who's been forecasting weather for years and years, the thing is, none of these convection allowing models do a consistent job of forecasting exactly where one thunderstorm hits and where it's going to go. It's a tough job. Let me take this area as an example. And what we're going to look at is another forecast model here that has a different solution to the same scenario. Here it is. Look at these storms. This looks a little more like what happened this evening, rolling out of places like Arkansas, backing into parts of East Texas and the hills out there and working their way down. This backward C shape looks to me like a windy event working its way down towards places like Lake Pontchartrain as we go into the deep hours of the overnight. And for the central time zone here, we subtract 5 hours from the Z time. This would be midnight. So this risk will move through the areas like Lake Pontchartrain as we approach the midnight hour and beyond, heading in towards Houston and central Texas as we go through the deep evening hours. The storm strength, though, does wane a little bit. Now let's rock and roll up into the high plains of Colorado, Kansas, and Nebraska, because these storms are firing just a little bit later. They're going now, and here they are, moving and rolling out of the metro area and out of Colorado Springs, heading into northeastern Colorado, Cheyenne, Wyoming, Scottsbluff, Nebraska, all going to see that chance of storms as we go through the evening hours. These will roll out as we go into the overnight hours all night into parts of central South Dakota and central Kansas. There'll be a risk of some storms, but the intensity of these storms should wane as we go toward the morning hours. That is a look at those threats. Now what we're going to do is take a look, since we're here, at the risk of what kind of weather are we expecting in these areas. Now, just so you know, Colorado and parts of northeast Colorado, southeast Wyoming are the hail capital of the world. These storms will have a great chance at producing some significant hail. One of the things that we need to take and make good hail size, big hail size, is an updraft that's strong. And we can look at where the updrafts might be the strongest by looking at what's called the potential energy in the atmosphere for rising motion. Convective atmospheric potential energy. So here's a look at this potential energy as we go through the next few hours here in portions of the high plains. And you see all the convective energy down in Oklahoma, not a lot of storms there. Then as we go through the evening hours now, notice it really does intensify heading into parts of the high plains. Now, if we take a look at the risk for tornadoes, there's a tornado parameter, and it's not too significant here in the high plains as we take a look. So the risk of tornadoes is not great in parts of Colorado and Nebraska as we go through the evening tonight. Now, if we switch our map over and take a look back in the deep south, what are the risks there? We'll leave it on the tornado parameter, and you can see that risk was higher earlier as those storms exited parts of Arkansas. And now, moving into parts of Texas, there's still a little bit of spinny spin in the air out there. That means the ingredients are in place for an isolated tornado in parts of Texas and northern parts of Louisiana as we go through the evening hours showers tonight. And now a look at the East Coast. And as we take a look at that part of the map, we can show you that there is indeed a little bit of spin in the atmosphere there as well, heading into the evening. Especially it's in pockets here, right? So as you look through parts of Pennsylvania, even into New Jersey, as we go through the evening hours, these gray shades you see here, some spin in the atmosphere. So that is what we see with regards to the forecast models and what we're looking at for timing. And now we've looked at the different risks involved. We're going to take you back to the Storm Prediction Center's look, and we'll take a highlighter and we'll highlight their risks that they have involved. And let's take a look at the risk for tornado number one. And the greatest risk for tornadic storms tonight is going to be in the storms approaching places like New York City, Scranton. And right now, if we take a look at this area, we do see a few thunderstorms working their way through Scranton and down towards Harrisburg and moving out towards New York City. So those storms have the greatest chance of having some spin to them. And this area of green is where we may see it. Not something that's very common. It's outside of Pittsburgh and north of Philly. Keep that in mind. But New York City, on towards Danbury and Bridgeport, Connecticut, all have a chance at that. The risk for tornadoes is showing up nowhere else across the nation, according to the Storm Prediction Center, as a real elevated threat tonight. Now, when we look at damaging straight line winds, there's a significant risk of straight line wind damage in these areas that you see in yellow. Now, what do the yellow areas mean? And we click on it and says it's a 15% chance that within about 30 miles of any point on the map, we could see some damaging wind. It's just a 15% chance, and not everywhere in these areas is going to see that risk, but from isolated storms, we certainly could. And now a look at that hail threat. And remember that area of Colorado and Wyoming, the nation's leading area for regards to the risk of hail, usually on an annual basis, the hail capital of the world. And here is where we have that greatest risk of seeing the hail. That's from northeast Colorado. So we're looking at areas up to the north there as we get into Fort Morgan, Cheyenne, Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and Sidney, Nebraska, all in that, as well as Sterling. That's where the risk of hail is going to be the greatest. So now we've looked at those risks, and now what we're going to do is take a look around the nation at the latest radar. So allow me a moment to turn off the content with regards from the Storm Prediction Center, and we'll take a look at the latest radar now as we cross into nearly, well, it's 5:45 Central Time, and it will be about 6:45 East Coast time. So let's get to it. Let's go to single site radar sites here, and let's look at some areas of concern out here in Philly. So in central parts of Pennsylvania, we have a swirling mass of storms, a lot more lightning out here near Scranton. Pittsburgh, it looks like a garden variety showers with a few rumbles of thunder right now. Let's go to your radar. Aha, out towards Canton, Ohio, and a little closer to Columbus, we have some strong storms out there approaching the Wheeling, West Virginia area. And these storms, as we set the loop on here for the last few frames, show the motion of these storms almost due east rather slowly. Are there warnings with any of these storms as we go through this time frame? Let me go ahead and turn that on for you. And now, again, the time frame. And let me put the time up at the top so you can see this, because this is a recorded version. We have a thunderstorm watch in all these yellow counties. That includes Canton, it includes Pittsburgh, and the storms are approaching your area as we are speaking now. Keep in mind, you'll want to go to your National Weather Service for the very latest, or your source of weather information as these storms approach. Right now, no severe thunderstorm warnings in or around Pittsburgh. However, look at what's going on out here. We have a solid line of severe storms. 60-mile-per-hour winds are the main threat from this whole line moving into Allentown, PA. Let's go ahead and take a look at the closest radar here. We see a backward C-shape or a bowing segment of storms, indicating some very gusty straight line wind potential with these storms. There are a couple of cells up here not far from the I-80 corridor that are showing some reds that would indicate some sizable hail with those particular storms, as these are also moving in the general direction from west to east. A little bit of a northeasterly trajectory to this bowing segment. Again, bowing meaning this backward C-shape that we're seeing on a couple of these storms that are forming a line. Now, these storms are working their way in toward Allentown and in towards Reading. Remember, this was the area where there was a risk of some spin in the storms. We'll take a look at the relative velocity and see from the radar site here. We do have a couple of storms approaching Allentown that are showing some greens next to red or some weak large scale spin. Nothing tight, nothing extraordinary extraordinarily strong at this time. And because the storms are more linear, the risk of that is a little bit lower of seeing storms that are tornadic or at least strong tornadoes. Along the leading edge of these gust fronts, we can get some tornadoes that do develop in pockets. They're usually short-lived, but still destructive. So pay attention to the local warnings going on from Scranton right down into Allentown as these storms are moving off to the east tonight. Severe thunderstorm watch remains in effect for the next 5 hours, and that would put us into that 10 to 11 o'clock time frame central, midnight for you folks on the East Coast. Looks like we have a severe thunderstorm warning moving into Salisbury. Let's take a look at what's going on here as we take a look at the closest radar. 60-mile-per-hour gusts as we take a look at this radar, and let's look at the regular reflectivity data. Ooh, these have a lot of pink in them. Some sizable hail for these storms moving out here over the Sound as we look into Chesapeake Bay. Moving off of the bay, though, these will come with quite a bit of a punch. Hail core right here, though, right over the big waters, and that's going to be heading over the islands and on shore here fairly quickly. So heed the warnings in Chesapeake Bay. Again, you're starting to see this little backwards C shape to these puppies as they're working their way off to the east. All right, that's a look at the active weather going on there. Now down to Tennessee, Nashville. Let's take a look at these warnings for storms that are taking place down there. 60-mile-per-hour winds, the main threat from these. These probably have a little bit more of a trajectory that's going to carry them to the north and east. So heading towards Bowling Green in the general flow of things in the atmosphere today. So from the Galton area on towards Lebanon, we're seeing these storms move out of your area and pushing on towards Westmoreland and on towards Lafayette. Portland going to see this very gusty storm working its way towards you as well. And again, the main threat from these, as just illustrated by the National Weather Service, is going to be the 60-mile-per-hour gusts. Some hail could be upwards of 3/4 of an inch in diameter. On up towards the Hopkinsville area, those storms are blasting through a huge signature of gusty winds from these storms. Not everybody along this backward C shape is going to see the gusty 60-mile-per-hour winds. It sometimes happens in very isolated spots with the outflow from these storms where they are the strongest. Now moving to the next risk area, let's go on towards Jackson, Mississippi, and we have a warning all the way out toward Birmingham, but not including Birmingham in Alabama. This is a severe thunderstorm watch in effect for the next 3 hours and 11 minutes Central Time. That would put it in towards around that 9 p.m. time frame. We're looking at the storms that are on the radar now. We have some strong ones on the south fringe of the watch area. We are seeing a few strong storms north of Jackson. These ones are also showing a line of movement more toward the south and east, and you can see an outflow boundary right here burping out of these storms. Gusty straight line winds can create what we call a roll cloud. That roll cloud rolls out ahead, caused by the outflow of cool air ahead of the storm. As that pushes out, it makes a new cloud, and we see what's called an outflow boundary on the radar. There it is. So those storms not warned for right now. There is one storm heading in the general direction of the Jackson area that had a statement on it. That storm there really fizzling out and deteriorating here over the last couple of scans as well. Now on down towards Baton Rouge, let's look at Lake Charles and take a look at the latest radar here. And as we go ahead and look at this radar, you can see this is heading right in towards the big lake out here, Lake Pontchartrain, and also right here as we look towards White Lake and up to the north of that. So now we do see these storms moving to the southeast. There's another one of these outflow boundaries pushing through, meaning gusty winds will be the main threat as they move towards Cameron out here. And as we look out towards New Orleans, they're a ways away. But Baton Rouge, a little closer to some stout thunderstorms. The county colors you see here, that's heat, folks. We have a heat advisory in effect for the next hour down there in the heat and humidity of the deep south. These storms are festering through and pushing towards Baton Rouge as we take a look. Still a ways out, no risk or nor watch for severe storms, mainly just maybe some refreshing rain-cooled air heading towards you. Houston, a couple of storms heading in your general direction south of the Woodlands, heading into the north metro area in the inner circle there. As we look down towards Sugar Land, a few storms heading towards you, Pearland and League City as we look to the south. Those not now severe. Now let's look at Colorado, and yes, indeed, we do have a smattering of severe thunderstorm warnings flashing for you in the high plains of southeast Colorado, moving towards Guyman, 1-inch hail and 6 60-mile-per-hour gusts are the main threat from that cell right there that's moving into the general direction of Guyman, south of Boise City. Look at that, right on the border with Oklahoma and Texas there. That's a border chaser, right? Now, as we take a look at that, there's some pinks in that, so some sizable hail. It looks like to me this guy here has some pretty good reflectivity values. What you're looking at in the crosshairs here, just outside of Stanford, high DBZ values, meaning these storms probably have a lot more upsidence, making bigger hailstones, making higher reflectivities on the radar display here. This one could be capable of sizable hail just outside of Stratford, and it's, well, the warning is for nickel-sized hail and 60-mile-per-hour gusts. Let's take a look at this storm here just a little bit more in detail here. And as we take a look at the cloud top heights, some of these storms have enormous push into the top parts of the atmosphere. The storm out here that's showing the deep reds and the pinks and the large hail potential has a lower cloud top height in orange than does the storm skirting the border right now. So we'll take out the crosshairs and I'll show you that these orange cells are pushing upwards close to 50,000 feet, but less than 50,000 feet, which means that this storm is likely collapsing down, and those hailstones are in the lower scans of the radar, so that's going to be hitting the ground soon. This storm looks like it's increasing in intensity and popping up to almost 60,000 feet in the atmosphere. That is a lot of feet in the atmosphere. This is a towering cloud that you probably can see from miles away, moving off to the east. So those are some threatening storms pushing along the panhandles of Texas and Oklahoma. Colorado, near Lamar, we do have a storm not far from La Junta. 1.25-inch diameter hail and 60-mile-per-hour winds is the threat from that storm. And you can see by the colors here, we have some cloud top heights that are pretty high as well, pushing 50,000 feet. Look at the movement of this storm from this area towards Lamar, toward that Highway 50 corridor, and that storm is out over rural parts of southeast Colorado right now. No development yet. We do have some Metro Denver storms. We'll go to the radar out at DIA, and we take a look at that. And let's turn off the echo tops and start looking at the storms themselves. These storms are literally rolling off of the high country of the Rocky Mountains. You get a little bit of upslope flow in the afternoon daytime heating, and boom, up we get these popcorn thunderstorms developing. You'll not only have a chance of storms tonight in the Denver area and points east, these are just getting started, and they'll be rolling out this evening into the high plains. Wind and hail will be the main threat from those particular storms. As we look across portions of the panhandle of Nebraska, Cheyenne, Wyoming, the radar there is showing, Hutch, that we do have a couple of thunderstorms beginning to develop, but not yet, so your threat comes a little bit later. Boise, Idaho, getting some noisy weather out there. As we look into the valley, Twin Falls, we have a hailstorm there capable of 1-inch diameter hail and 60-mile-per-hour winds. And as we take a look at the latest radar from your zone, it's loading up right near Jerome. We have a hail cell not far from Gooding. Where is it moving? Off to the east, it looks like, as the National Weather Service has these polygons spreading out to the east here. Here it is moving along, mainly out of the I-84 corridor and into rural portions of southeast portions of Idaho. That's a look at your weather situation right now. And as a hint, let me turn off the radar data here and let me turn off the watch data. I do want to point to you that tomorrow on Thursday, there is a enhanced risk for severe weather in the northern plains and portions of the high plains once again. Now, I'll turn on this risk for day 2 so you can get a feel for where it is. But if you are in western portions of the Dakotas, if you are in eastern Montana, spreading down into the central high plains here of Nebraska and South Dakota here, that is an enhanced risk of severe storms. We could see a couple strong tornadoes. We could see very large hail, upwards of 3 inches in diameter in these areas, and we're expecting a potential for 80 mile-per-hour wind gusts in the western Dakotas, eastern Montana, including the Big Sky country there near Glendive, Montana, all the way down to the sandhills of Nebraska and the Black Hills of South Dakota. Denver misses the risk. They were in the green area. That doesn't mean green for go. It means that you could have marginal risk of severe storms across all of western and central Colorado tomorrow. The greatest risk for stout storms in the level 1, level 2 area here, the yellow area, would be Grand Island, Nebraska, and to Valentine and off into Goodland, Kansas. So I'll have a video posted about these risks, and I'll go over some of that. Look for that right here on Hutch's Weather. Thanks for watching. Love to have your likes if you like the content here. You can watch more of my detailed videos and learn a little bit more about me I like to do a few things out there besides watch the weather. I like to play guitars and play with cars. You can see more on that by checking out some of the videos above. Otherwise, have a wonderful evening.